The Great State of California. Department of Industrial Relations. Labor Commissioner's Office. Address located at Number 2 MacArthur Place, Suite 800. Santa Ana, California 92707. laborcom.wca.ana@dirca.gov. Fax 71466266048. This matter regarding an active wage claim case number WCCM 801208. The contents hereinafter addressed to the attention of the Honorable Deputy Michelle Ellington. All matters relevant to this case were submitted by plaintiff. Plaintiff. Improper person. Full legal name: Quang Viet Tran. 9722 Imperial Avenue, Garden Grove, California 94844. Telephone 71488900048. Cutran98@outlook.com.
Versus D. Bui Nguyen, Elizabeth Nguyen.
Hanoi Plaza LLC. Saigon Center LLC. Does I through X, inclusive, and ROE. Business entities I through X, inclusive. All are defendants. Plaintiff. Complaint for equitable damages. Punitive damages. Compensation of unpaid wage, and request for reimbursement on stolen personal properties. Introduction to nature of the case. Quang Tran, hereinafter plaintiff, improper person, brings action and complains against B. Bui Nguyen, Elizabeth Nguyen, Hanoi Plaza LLC, Saigon Center LLC, Does I through X, inclusive, and ROE business entities I through X, inclusive, hereinafter defendants. Plaintiff is an individual who is currently, and was at all relevant times herein, a resident of the state California, herewith is pleading plaintiff Shaw for equitable justice for undue harms inflicted upon plaintiff pursuing prevailing wage claim case No. WCCM 801208 against defendants. The cause of action in the complaint arises by defendants violated Wage Theft Protection Act, Worker Compensation Insurance, of California Labor Code, and with malice intended committed Prohibits Act, AB.2501. Defendant B. Bui Nguyen, hereinafter Defendant B, is an individual who is currently, and was at all relevant times herein, a resident of the state of California. Defendant Elizabeth Nguyen, hereinafter Defendant Elizabeth, is an individual who is currently, and was at all relevant times herein, a resident of the state of California. Hanoi Plaza LLC is a business entity organized and existing by virtue of the laws of the state of California, and Saigon Center LLC is a business entity organized and existing by virtue of the laws of the state of California. All four defendants currently registered at address as office/resident, 6381 Beachview Drive, Huntington Beach, California 92648. All the acts and or failures to act alleged herein were duly performed by and or are attributable to defendants, individually or acting by and through their agents and employees. Said acts and or failures to act were within the scope of any agency or employment or were ratified by defendants. The names and capacities, whether individual, corporate, associate or otherwise, of defendants and or their alter egos sued herein as Does I through X, and ROE business entities I through X, inclusive, are presently unknown, and plaintiff will amend this complaint to insert the names when ascertained. Equitable claims. This complaint seeks equitable and legal remedy from defendants for the unpaid of wage from August 1, 2017 to June 27, 2020, as shown in Exhibit 2. P1. Plus, defendants failed to pay unpaid final wage 2 final months, May-June 2020. All the days that plaintiff suffered now known that plaintiff been misled made belief that plaintiff was doing things for the greater good, but all along defendants were deceived plaintiff for the purpose continuing exploited plaintiff for their advantages that profited them. Moreover, defendants' goals were to have plaintiff to work for defendants as long as possible, for a smallest cost to defendants, exploited plaintiff as a modern indebted slave to perform all kinds of works on demand for defendants at any hours day or night whenever defendants wanted, and to getting as much as defendants could out of plaintiff by been pushed plaintiff to work as hard as 3 workers. Therefore, for what it worth this complaint seeks the punitive damages and injunctive relief equally to the amount no lesser than 2 times x2 of the resulted by what it computed in Exhibit 2. P1. This complaint also seeks to strict defendants fully in compliance with California Labor Code and worker compensation law, to avoid these problems from repeat again. This complaint seeks the fairness in reimbursements and legal mandates toward defendants to return tools, equipment and all personal effects that belong to plaintiff. This complaint seeks equitable justice for damages to society by hold defendants responsible for any civic costs, expenditures, fines, fees, and penalties owed to the state of California related to this case and to what found as additional violations that defendants violated within the Labor Code of California for the purpose of edification, deters any future replication. This complaint additionally seeks equitable justice for damages, legal remedy for pains and suffers, and, due to the severities of the damages, hardships, and emotional distress that plaintiff endured were extremely unacceptable. This complaint seeks for strict liability of which due by defendants negligent, breached in oral contracts with plaintiff, and failed to act their respective duty to reasonable due diligence to plaintiff, and defendant conducted an outrageous deed with obvious evil intentions demonstrates a reckless disregard for law and for the well-being and basic means to the survival of a human life during the pandemic COVID-19 as stipulated in the Assembly Bill No. 2501, an emergency amended as current enacted as law for the applicable conducts guideline intended to maintain the fairness and to avoid undue hardship and or any unnecessary legal injustice to all Californians during COVID-19 and the financial difficulty that affects all of the citizens of California during the pandemic. Finally, this complaint seeks payments from defendants pay toward business charging accounts, debts which defendants owed to the 404 lessee tenants that have their businesses at 2 business complexes belonged to defendants and now past due because defendants was in avoidance to pay and put the blame onto plaintiff. Jurisdiction and parties. Jurisdiction. Plaintiff initiated a wage claim against defendants with the Labor Commissioner's Office in Santa Ana of California. Therefore, jurisdiction of the case remains under the Labor Commissioner's Office of the Department of Industrial Relations of the State of California. In the preliminary stage of this action by the Policies and Procedures for Wage Claim Processing, plaintiff fully respects the integrity and the impartial of the Labor Commissioner's Office and its officer representing statutes of the Labor Code of State of California, specifically the deputy the officer in charge of this wage claim case No. WCCM 801208. Plaintiff clearly understood the seriousness and the consequences in declaring a legal claim to bring action against anyone, no matter that is against an individual, a group, or a business entity be the same for the responsibilities and consequences that plaintiff will be held responsible under the law should any part of misleading or bad faith found in the claim presented by plaintiff. Plaintiff in proper person, clear-minded and soberly, and under no influential of guidance or instruction by any third party in this matter, plaintiff taken his own liberty in the preparation this preliminary pleading as a legal binding supplements to be amended to plaintiff submitted, initial claim, which submitted to the Labor Commissioner's Office on July 7, 2020. Plaintiff for 3 years with an income that way below the acceptable poverty line, that worth $60 to $80 as disposable income after deducted the necessary expenditures monthly. The reason plaintiff bound this job by an oral comment that later turned into a promise that defendants expected plaintiff had a duty to honor and to deliver. By the financial status, plaintiff could not afford the legal aids from attorney or law office for help or guidance when an issue in question. However, it is not and will not be in any way or form as an excuse or as a reason for plaintiff to hide behind as ignorance to the laws. Thus, this paper plaintiff's so-called preliminary pleading addressed to the deputy of this case representing the Labor Commissioner's office with the highest respects to the laws plaintiff voluntary renders the full rights and total control of this preliminary pleading in the discretions of the deputy, meaning for instance, rather to make it available to defendants and/or negotiations for settlements. This preliminary pleading intended to provide factual informative on events, factual thoughts process, and basic legal theory arguments by plaintiff for the conference, preliminary stage and broader views in supporting plaintiff claim and plaintiff praise that with the pleadings in this case plaintiff would be granted favor in either by settlements or by further pursuing judgments on the case. The contents and factual statements in the body of this document shall remain unchanged from the date it submitted as it became legal. However, plaintiff prays for the rights to amending by insert other new information relevant to this case as attachment or attachments to this document. Defendants: Ike B. Boyingwin, Defendant B.
B. Elizabeth Nguyen, Defendant Elizabeth.
Sia Hanoi Plaza, LLC. D. Saigon Center, LLC. Defendants are currently registered under California Secretary of State. Residence/office located 6381 Beachview Drive, Huntington Beach, California 92648. Banking: Hanoi Plaza, a building/business complex. Physical address is located at 9060 to 9122 Bolsa Avenue, Westminster, California 92683. C. Illustrate number 01 Hanoi Plaza. Saigon Center, a building/business complex. Physical address is located at 10451 to 10495 Bolsa Avenue, Westminster, California 92683. C. Illustrate number 02 Saigon Center. An inclusive E. Does I through X and ROE business entities I through X, inclusive, are presently unknown, and plaintiff will amend this complaint to insert the names when ascertained. Allegations: I am Quang Tran, and I am the sole author for the contents of this whole pleading document, included all which I stated previously before this paragraph and now hereafter, under clear, sober, and in my full consciousness mental stage. I solemnly swear as God my own witness for that I commit to tell the truth and nothing but the whole truth, so helps me God. 1,060 days giving or take a few, that were how many counted days plaintiff had worked for the defendants as an employee for an income of $500, paid in cash by defendants for each worked month from August 1, 2017 to April 30, 2020. That did not count final wages in the two months May and June of 2020, which defendants' willful intended avoidance to pay to plaintiff. When the plaintiff's last day of work was June 17, 2020. Plaintiff hereby alleged that defendants violated 1. The minimum wage, 2. The Wage Theft Protection Act, 3. Unpaid final wage plus obligations of employer to reimbursements and return employees' properties, 4. Workers' Compensation Insurance of California Labor Code, 5. Enacted Law AB No. .2501, 6. Breach of contracts, and 7. Tort of intentional infliction of emotional distress, IIED. This preliminary pleading specifically serves its purpose: basic pleadings and disclosures factual events of the case set for the conference. Therefore, the allegations presented above as listed of these claims of violations. However, should this case choose to further to the hearing, Each of these claims will be addressed specifically in each violated count and explanatory cause of action. Factual statements. The fact that prior to August of 2017, Defendant Elizabeth sought out plaintiff and pleaded for helps. Defendant's property at Hanoi Plaza needed works to compliant with electrical building code so she could secure an important lease from a potential tenant whose productions are franchised, of which it will be benefited to defendants greatly for a long time. Moreover, their property at Hanoi Plaza was run down and deteriorated badly from the absence of cares and maintenance were the obvious evidence. Homeless peoples were taken residencies on site. They set up camps everywhere around premises of the property. Defendant Elizabeth pleaded for helps and applied the relationships between the late father and plaintiff as the hook of guilt through time. Plaintiff was convinced and fall in for her request. Defendant Elizabeth said after the father died defendants were in mourning and without the father's guidance things got out of control. Perhaps give her few months of plaintiff's time, help her to put things back in order. Plaintiff quoted the exact words were said, "Just only few months please, and when you have enough you can quit at any time." Plaintiff came up a simple plan with proper work crews and funding. The plan would be finished in 3 months. Plaintiff explained what make the plan to work required commitment of defendants, check report evaluates process daily, make correction for what needed changed in manual. Defendant's responsibility is to place ads for employment and to hire workers. After training familiar to the works, follow the manual to maintain thing prevented from broken down. When near the date to start, Defendant Elizabeth failed to have the workers and never did put out an ad offers employment as plaintiff asked. It boiled down to the hearing problems. Defendant Elizabeth did not hear that request. Defendant Elizabeth then passed the responsibility to plaintiff to find workers. Few days later with two workers plaintiff brought in, but defendant Elizabeth is out of country on vacation and here the works already started without working capital to pay out for trash dumping. Thus, for the time being paid out at the dump site by plaintiff's money after the paid out reached $600 and that'll be it. When plaintiff ran out his own cash to pay out for trash dumping at Hanoi Plaza, without said defendant be handed to plaintiff $700. During the process working on the original plan, at first extra works added to the plan as favors, slowly the added works were considered like request and later they became the orders on a daily to-do list. The new works kept added on top the previous ones every day make the plan harder to reach its deadline or even finish if it ever will. Several times defendant Elizabeth implied through normal conversations that plaintiff will be held morally responsible for a promise since plaintiff was the one that promoted a plan. It was a concept that so-called by plaintiff as preventative measures maintenance. By the implication to make good to a promise, meaning plaintiff will have to stay in working for defendants until it is completed. To offset the additional assignments and make the scheduled deadline achievable in a timely manner, plaintiff put in long hour every day 12 to 16 hours labor each day hopeful to be done with the promise soon. That date never come. After a while, the workloads overshadowed the original intention. During the whole period that plaintiff was working for defendants, twice plaintiff approached defendant Elizabeth. Both of events were in constructive manners but with determinations that the works must be focused on the original concept, otherwise plaintiff had no choice but quit. Each time, defendant Elizabeth used the concept, just an idea that plaintiff had, it can be developed as instructional guidelines to help maintain defendant's property at Hanoi Plaza remains in better condition, as a promise made by plaintiff, and it was plaintiff's moral obligation to delivering it. Furthermore, defendant Elizabeth added to the guilts toward plaintiff's moral obligations by brought up the name of late father of defendant Elizabeth, since before his death he highly recommended plaintiff to defendant Elizabeth. Therefore, if plaintiff failed, it be like failure of the last words recommended by defendant Elizabeth late father. In October 2017, defendant Elizabeth asked plaintiff to check out a problem for her at the other commercial property, Saigon Center. Ownership belongs to defendants. At Saigon Center, the problem obviously was the trash compactor, the big heavy duty, this one sizes as a 20-foot container, was broken down. That was reason for trash from the tenants deposited and the machine down past 3 days, therefore accumulated to piles of rotten molehills. Defendant Elizabeth informed to plaintiff that nobody is going come out to fix that trash compactor. In a way, she just laid that responsibility on plaintiff. In short, plaintiff solved it. Rebuilt the hydraulic system, and the machine works for more than 2 years since then. But that too, the works also required late hours and minimal 12 hours to 16 hours each days of hard labor that plaintiff put in for the works benefited defendants. Exhibit V, P16. While at the new job site, Saigon Center, from visual findings it also shown the absence of care. There were so many things that were needed attentions. At that time, the vacancy rate was about 60%, roof leaks tenants complained from every unit, rooftop equipment HVAC units 85% were either broken down and or vandalized. Plaintiff found Saigon Center, it was the same like Hanoi Plaza. The homeless folks were taken residence in 3 of the vacancies. Moreover, on the second floor inside the elevator's cables room, one girl took over this utility room as her own place. According to her, she lived there for almost 7 years with her daughter. The lightings at nights for the whole business complexes were poorly lit. The lighting's luminaires were below the safety standards for business operates at late hours. Because plaintiff worked 16 hours a day and most time from late afternoon work till the first light in morning, plaintiff noticed of there were drugs market activities happened at nights. Plaintiff warned defendant Elizabeth about what going on at night. As a result, the problems were thrown back on plaintiff to solve. At this point, by so many issues unconscionable that out of the original concept that obligated plaintiff was a reason plaintiff was mainly agreed to help. Plaintiff had reasoned with defendant Elizabeth about after evaluated and realized the solution for this is defendants must seriously recruit a group of valuable and honest employees of 2 or 3 personnel full-time to work for defendants to handling the maintenances. Or maybe hire a professional service company to handle the maintenances under strict supervisions of defendant Elizabeth. However, these recommendations never implemented. The pool of workers remained as call in when the work is needed. After that conversation, plaintiff acknowledged the uniqueness in ways of reacting to confrontation. Even issues brought up to previous conversation was fully with constructive intended from plaintiff. It was very strange, differed from many conversations with other peoples throughout plaintiff's lifetime. Regardless how challenged or difficulty the topics were, always there was the middle points of understanding always resulted mutually at the end from both sides. Here, nothing happens and the whole thing likes watering on stone. At the end, more tasks were added on for plaintiff. In November, there were couple days came with heavy rainstorm. Plaintiff checked out rain effects evaluation to the building's infrastructure and discovered the posts and beams were damaged by rainwater washed out their inner cores, caused them became hollow and collapsed by the weight at top, pressed down and shifted the whole balcony outer edge downward 3.5 inches, 3.5 inch. This is a serious and urgent concerned matter. Building structural integrity depleted or compromised is serious enough for the shutting down of the whole business complex, such as Saigon Center. Plaintiff faced a duty to act and brought this urgent public safety concerned matter to defendants to resolve. The structure's repair works required lot more professionals involved and plaintiff able managed through existing contacts that known to plaintiff and acquired repair working permits from the city of Westminster. However, the actual repair labors it also required large number experienced workers. Defendant Elizabeth wanted plaintiff to ask from those who had worked with plaintiff in past projects came for job interview by defendant Elizabeth. Defendant Elizabeth handling the hiring and payroll, which plaintiff was asked to be off limit. The duties were stacked up for plaintiff to handle daily, such were providing guided schedules, technical plans, keeping records and hours of workers, provide progress updated reports to defendant Elizabeth, and performing additional works as previously done. All new duties added workload above, plus the original responsibilities required plaintiff to put in average 12+ hours a day included Saturdays and Sundays up till the end of March 2020, and for the same defendants paid $500, $500 even each month. Defendants never offer plaintiff a vacation time off. With the monthly income so low, there was a time plaintiff's shoes worn out badly and plaintiff could not even afford a pair of shoes to replace the old ones. Yet the demanded works tight into the total control by defendant Elizabeth. Little by little the well-being for plaintiff became as a dependent, relying on the leniency from defendants. Twice plaintiff received remarks from defendants reminded plaintiff should be appreciative and grateful to their kindnesses. Each time plaintiff wondered what that meant about the comment. Plaintiff can quantify the and compute to figure out the total number of dollars that defendants had gained in profits from plaintiff in past 3 years. By then defendants would know that who is a taker and who is a giver. Plaintiff felt like a modern slave shackled by the invisible chains, stuck inside an invisible cage, and the key to self-preservation to one's own moral integrity been squashed and violated. While working for defendants, plaintiff performed few assignments that plaintiff viewed them as irregular and not morally affixed with plaintiff's personal belief. The workloads were kept on escalated. By the 28th of May 2020, on such day, plaintiff accidentally got hurt. Over a phone conversation, plaintiff reported the incident to defendant Elizabeth. Plus the next day, May 29, plaintiff mentioned in a report FYI briefing A, Exhibit 3. P1, report to defendant Elizabeth. Plaintiff realized a fact was defendants did not carry worker compensation insurance. Plaintiff had no intention on seeking a worker compensation claim on the work-related injury on that day then, and the same goes for now. However, it compelled that the defendants must carry some coverages for those workers in future and for those temporary workers. It got so bad, the emotional drainage and mental stress, to the point plaintiff concluded it was unreasonable to continue working for defendants and decided that the final point has reached. Out of choices, no alternative option but to quit, and the notice of resignation was sent to defendant Elizabeth on Sunday, June 7 of 2020, see Exhibit 3. P.30. Moreover, when requested the rights to reclaim plaintiff properties, such items involved tools, equipment, and medical prescribed back brace, knees braces, walking can and prescription for nearsighted glasses. Those were brought to work by plaintiff and left behind in the workshop unit 208. The matter was totally ignored by defendants Elizabeth. A laundry operator who was a lessee tenant of defendants called plaintiff and asked for $100 for the laundry bills charged on laundry, which defendant Elizabeth denied. How this laundry operator got plaintiff phone number is a clear indication that was given by defendant Elizabeth. What hurts that the laundry operator called plaintiff a thief, cheated her earnest money after plaintiff replied to her that plaintiff had no funds to pay for the bill at this time, and plaintiff explained that the bill should be sent to defendants as the same way how this laundry operator had been done so for the past 2 years. Furthermore, plaintiff recognized this as the act of slandering played out by defendants aimed to smear plaintiff reputations. One other charged account owned to a lessee tenant of defendants at Saigon Center is a restaurant in Nguyen Hue that defendant Elizabeth is responsible to pay for, also been denied an avoidance to pay the balance of $242, plus 2 other tenants at Hanoi Plaza. The outrageous ACT, the factual final events occurred as follows. On June 17, 2020, defendant Elizabeth asked a person former part-time assistant to plaintiff whose name is Sang came to plaintiff place for help, hereinafter person Sang, and who was a part-time trainee, and aide, to help plaintiff couple hours each day. Furthermore, plaintiff recognized this as the act of slandering played out by defendants aimed to smear plaintiff reputations. One other charged account owned to a lessee tenant of defendants at Saigon Center is a restaurant person saying he came to plaintiff at almost midnight on June 17, 20. He sought plaintiff to help him with a task at Saigon Center, but the purpose was to check out on plaintiff and provide briefing report to defendant Elizabeth. A sworn affidavit from person Sang will be added. On July 2, 2020, after got better, plaintiff found an email from defendant Elizabeth, sent, dated June 17, 20, with thanks from defendant Elizabeth to plaintiff, Exhibit V, P49-3. On July 2, 2020, plaintiff also found an email, sent, dated June 17, 20. Finally, defendant Elizabeth acknowledged plaintiff's resignation, Exhibit V, P49-4. On June 29, 20, defendant Elizabeth sent plaintiff a memo ROP accused plaintiff as thief, and used the law enforcement's threatening that defendant Elizabeth will take actions on the false claims stated in the ROP. Early in the morning of July 1, 20, defendant Elizabeth recklessly neglected to an enacted law AB No. .2501. Defendant Elizabeth carried out as illegal self-help repossessed a vehicle which was loaned to plaintiff prior to a legitimacy of a certified mail notice of defendant's intention got to plaintiff and given no concern for plaintiff's personal effects. Important items such were cell phone and medications were left in the vehicle. On July 2, 2020, plaintiff learned that defendant Elizabeth had self-helped and repossessed the car. Thus defendant Elizabeth disrespected the law, willful violated California AB No. .2501 Chapter 3 Section 3273.31 Vehicle Secured Credit Obligation pursuant to Paragraph 2 of Subdivision B of Section 9609 of the California Commercial Code. Plaintiff made a call from a neighbor's phone and left a message regarding personal effects were in the vehicle. By defendant Elizabeth was unwilling to release personal properties to plaintiff. This matter could view as a criminal offense with intended to steal the properties belonged to plaintiff. By June 17, 2020, plaintiff handed all keys to a worker whose name is Jose Sanchez and instructed him to hand over to defendant Elizabeth. Plaintiff purposely did not want a communication with defendant Elizabeth by the phone and or by email conversation due to the following three factors. About plaintiff had injured at work. Defendant's was failure to act on it and did not respond to plaintiff's report in FYI sent to defendant Elizabeth on May 29, 2020. Defendant Elizabeth further failure to act on and did not respond to the notice of resignation that plaintiff sent out the second time on June 11, 2020. On the night of June 17, 2020. After helped person Sang, former assistant, on the way home accidentally plaintiff's injured right toe hit the brake paddle while driving, plaintiff could not wear shoe and had to wear slipper, disturbed the wound, caused it to bleed out blood again, and the infection started. Thus, from June 18, 20 to 7/2/20 plaintiff could only accept things happened as the faith played out while plaintiff laid sick in bed. Since it had happened before, plaintiff avoided from repetition. If allowed, defendant Elizabeth will try to have the communication back online. Defendant Elizabeth will change the directions to another urgency matter. Defendant Elizabeth will ignore those pre-existing issues totally, and then defendant Elizabeth will act as nothing ever occur. Plaintiff had enough of these smart tactics. 3 years of plaintiff's life had gone into dust by worked for defendants almost like a slave under defendant Elizabeth cleverness, always undermining the means of logics and cover up factual issues to cause conflicts between realities and falsehoods, put matters harder to reasoning any counter-argument. Thus, plaintiff wanted to break out of this cycle and wanted to be free. It was a means to an end. On the first week of May or June 2020, defendant Elizabeth requested plaintiff to check out a minor concerned issue at Hanoi Plaza. However, the finding was a stunning shock of morality wake-up call to plaintiff. This matter is not acceptable to plaintiff, it redefines everything. It was an issue that depleted and null all reasons for plaintiff to trust defendant Elizabeth. After the findings, plaintiff were totally in shock and went straight to home and got ill. Plaintiff had taken couple days off for been too sick by the unbelievable discovering to work. The finding evidently affirmed to plaintiff about a previous conduct executed by defendant Elizabeth purposely to gain financial judgment awarded to defendants was wrongful while it placed injustice to the victim. Hence, plaintiff prays for advice from the deputy in charge of this case for directions and/or instructions to help these matters to lights. Plaintiffs strongly believe that these acts were violated the penal codes of California. Therefore, even if plaintiff did not get hurt on May 28, 2020, plaintiff would resign from working for defendants anyway. Plaintiff, as intended in the resignation notification memo from June 7, 2020 to July 1, 2020, there will be enough time for plaintiff to have a replacement transportation, to bring tools and belongings home. Then return the car to defendants. But the infections destroyed that plan totally. Because the importance of the duty to act lays in an issue mentioned above in Part 39 and 50, it becomes the moral obligation that plaintiff must carry out to right the wrong with the victims and make thing right. Plaintiff is without a choice. After the loaned vehicle was taken away, the landlord at home also informed the plaintiff that he had not received the $500 from defendant Elizabeth for the month May and the month of June. Normally the $500 monthly defendant Elizabeth deposits directly into the landlord at home bank account. Moreover, the previous month's plaintiff ordered items online from Amazon and other vendors for the out-of-pocket money plaintiff had not submit for reimbursements. These purchased items are remained at Unit 205 and Unit 208 Building 10451, Saigon Center, Bolsa Avenue, Westminster, California 92683. Thus, plaintiff like to have these items returned to plaintiff. Plaintiff has in possession some items belonged to defendant Elizabeth loaned to plaintiff to use and plaintiff would like to return them. Punitive damages. Whereas the conduct of defendants described above is outrageous and this conduct demonstrates defendants' disregard for plaintiff's individual employee rights, plus is a mindful exploitation on labor for personal gains, disrespect the rules for fair plays, failure to perform reasonable due diligence and failure duty of care as an employer. Whereas, from hatred defendants committed an intentional act with conducts that violated California current amended emergency enacted law AB No.2501 such law amended during COVID-19 pandemic as California preventive adjustments to avoid injustice actions that brings undue hardships to its citizens while transportation is the essential necessary to individual and a family to survival during a pandemic. Whereas the damages and harms that caused by the defendants inflicted upon plaintiff occurred during most challenging time for state and local government agencies due to pandemic coronavirus COVID-19 and recent social turbulences, thus governmental resources reserved at the front lines, while plaintiff respected that fact and plaintiff voluntarily refrained himself from seeking the supports otherwise the law enforcer would be available to defend and protect his civil rights as a common Californian and as an American citizen when a criminal act conducted by defendants such as unlawfully taken his personal properties was transpired on July 2, 2020. After the pandemic is over and our communities returns to its norms, this cruel and lawless act will and shall bequested defendants to face proper criminal charge as defendants and their associate or associates those individual or individuals who participated with defendants in carry out this criminal act. Whereas these violated acts and omissions described above were willful and performed with actual or implied exploitations benefited for profits and self-gained, while events in displeased defendants disregarded the laws and reacted with high degree of evil intended. Henceforth, punitive and exemplary damages are therefore appropriate and should be imposed in this instance. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, plaintiffs respectfully pray for a judgment against defendants for injunctive and equitable relief as the Labor Commissioner or the representative officer in charge of this case deems appropriate, including requiring defendants to responsible to pay toward plaintiff for the amount of $375,164.24, $375,164.24, as equal to 2 times of the stolen, unpaid of wage from August 1, 2017 to June 17, 2020, in Exhibit 2. P1. As compensation for the undue hardships, pains, and suffers plaintiff greatly endured by been underpaid while provided not just the hard labor but intellectual contributions, know-hows, and professional networks that involved in construction works which enhanced the property's values and enhanced financial revenues to defendants. Note, these number and other claims will be added if defendants rejected any offer given by the deputy in charge of the case. Requiring with legal mandates toward defendants to reimbursements for materials, plus pay for technological inventions performed by plaintiff on defendants' properties and to return tools, equipment and all personal effects that belong to plaintiff. Requiring defendants with legal mandates fully in strict compliance with California Labor Code and worker compensation law. Compelling defendants must pay toward business charging accounts, debts which defendants owed to the four lessee tenants at the 2 of defendants' business complexes, with proof acknowledged that payments were made in full and finalized balance to provide closure to these accounts. Cleared plaintiff name from each account must be signed by the recipients. At Hanoi Plaza. Restaurant Pho Hai to $33 for 3 meals. Restaurant Tan Hai Unit N0. $96.90 $15 for 1 diner. At Saigon Center. Dry cleaner $100 for services February-May. Restaurant Pho Nguyen Hue $242 for take-home meals from 3 to 5/20. Compensatory damages to be paid by defendants, according to conclusions of the Labor Commissioner. Punitive damages as the Labor Commissioner deems appropriate. Costs and fees of California, with interest paid to Labor Commissioner. Any other relief as the Commissioner deems appropriate. Dated, January 9, 2021. Quang Viet Tran, individual. 9722 Imperial Avenue. Garden Grove, California 94844. 71488900048. Cutran98@outlook.com. Plaintiffs. I Quang Tran, plaintiff hereby, certify to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief that this complaint, 1, is not being presented for an improper purpose such as to harass, cause unnecessary delay, or needlessly increase the cost of litigation. 2, is supported by existing law or by a non-frivolous argument for extending, modifying, or reversing existing law. And 3, the factual contentions have evidentiary support or, if specifically so identified, will likely have evidentiary support after a reasonable opportunity for further investigation or discovery. Dated, January 9, 2021. Quang Viet Tran. Plaintiff in proper person.